Well, and I want to welcome everyone. My name is Kathy McCory. I'm with the Greater Issaquah Chamber of Commerce, and we're excited to bring you another webinar this month, but particularly so because this one is so important for all of us and everything we've been through since COVID began. And we're going to ask you if you would save your questions and answers until the end. If you want to go ahead and put them in the chat so you do not forget, please go ahead and do that, because I will help monitor the chat, as well as hopefully being able to just raise your hands and things like that to ask questions at the end. And so today we're going to talk about burnout in the workplace, mental health, and mindfulness. And our guest speaker today is Mallory Mixford. Let me tell you a little bit about Mallory. She's a licensed independent clinical social worker and graduated with a Master's of Arts in Social Work from the University of Chicago and received her bachelor's from the University of Washington. Mallory is the Resident and Family Support Programs Director for Era Living, which includes oversight of all of the counseling programs for all 8 Era Living communities, as well as direction of the Almost Like Family program. Mallory has worked on mental health psychotherapist in a private practice in Chicago, as a program manager at the American Hospital Association, as an independent inpatient medical social worker at the University of Chicago Hospital, and in private care management. She has a lifelong passion for social impact and advocacy, and has spent 10+ years in the social work public health sector. Outside of work, Mallory is a certified yoga instructor and co-owns a yoga studio on Mercer Island with her husband. She enjoys reading, wine tasting, and traveling, in addition to spending time with her husband, her dog, and her new 6-month-old son. So Mallory, welcome. Thank you so much for taking time out to be with the Greater Issaquah Chamber today. We have your presentation up and running. I'm going to let you take it from here.
Thank you, Kathy. And sorry if I was bouncing around my slides. I just wanted to make sure it was sharing. So I'm glad we're all good. Hi, everyone. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy days to join me and the Issaquah Chamber of Commerce to talk about this important topic. A lot of buzzwords around mindfulness and burnout lately in mental health. So just wanted to break it down for you all and find ways to be resourceful and learn from each other in ways we can support ourselves, support our coworkers, employees, and each other. A little bit about me, like Kathy mentioned, I've kind of run the gamut in different aspects of social work and program management, and I am new to Era Living. I started here the beginning of August because I was completing my maternity leave with my little boy. I'm originally from this area, but the last decade or so I've spent in Chicago, but I decided to come home to be closer to family and friends and just sort of get back to my roots. So I'm really happy to be back here, and Washington is such a wonderful place to be. So I appreciate being welcomed home. So this presentation is about burnout, workplace, mental health, and mindfulness. I am not a doctor, so none of this should be taken with too much of a grain of salt, but I am a licensed mental health practitioner. So I hope you take some of these tips and tricks with you into your workplace. All right, I'm trying to see, there we go. Okay, so burnout by definition, according to the Mayo Clinic, job burnout is a special type of work-related stress, a state of physical or emotional exhaustion that also involves a sense of reduced accomplishment and loss of personal identity. So on paper, that sounds kind of heavy, but if you take a step back and really think about what that could look like for you, physical or emotional exhaustion, and we could talk about the different symptoms of what that looks like and how that can play out for different folks. Sense of reduced accomplishment, maybe you feel like whatever you do isn't good enough, or you're not getting the type of feedback you're looking for, which kind of creates this negative feedback loop. Or just a loss of personal identity. If you feel like you don't know who you are outside of work anymore, a lot of people have felt that way, particularly with the pandemic, working from home. those work-life balance lines have started to blur. So it's a common occurrence, doesn't make it any more difficult, but a lot of us are going through it. So let's take a quick quiz and just ask yourself, you don't have to type in the chat if you don't want to, but feel free to share if you'd like to. If you've become more pessimistic or critical at work, if you find yourself having to drag yourself out of bed to work and have difficulty getting going, maybe you're becoming cranky with your coworkers, you've lost patience with customers or clients in the last year or so. Maybe you find it difficult to find the energy to be productive. You just have enough energy to get by and do the bare minimum. Maybe you have a hard time concentrating or paying attention. You find your mind wandering more than it used to. Maybe you're unsatisfied with your achievements, and maybe these are things you used to feel proud of, but lately they just don't feel as personally satisfying. Or maybe you feel a sense of disillusionment about your career. You start to doubt what you're contributing or what you're doing at work, if it's making a difference. Maybe you're starting to use alcohol or drugs more or less, hopefully not more, but it can happen, just a change in your patterns. Maybe you're eating different kinds of food, eating more or less than you used to, or at different times. Maybe you're gambling to feel better, or maybe you're gambling to not feel at all. So a lot of these different types of activities can lead to addiction. And so we try to look out for that. If you're sleeping much more or much less than you used to, maybe the quality of your sleep has changed. Maybe you're waking up more in the middle of the night, or waking up earlier than you used to, or just not being able to fall asleep at night. Or maybe you're experiencing unexplained symptoms, physical symptoms like muscle aches, headaches, stomach issues, the list can go on, skin issues. There really is a body-mind connection. And oftentimes when we don't listen to our intuition that's telling us we're starting to burn out, our body will find ways to show us that we're burning out. So I do see a comment here in the chat, Amy saying that she's definitely experiencing some of these common symptoms of burnout. And I'm sure you're not the only one, Amy. So what causes burnout? Some, but certainly not all. This list is certainly not exhaustive. Possible reasons behind workplace burnout include a perceived lack of control. So maybe you're starting to work from home now, and you don't have as much control over your schedule. You're working while your kids are home. You're working in the middle of the night because your office is right next to your bed, or you just don't have as much control over your schedule anymore, or you don't have control over whether you're going to go back into the office. A lot of these things that we took for granted before that we did have control over, we've lost. Ill-defined job expectations. I'm sure many of you can understand this, especially with the pandemic. Job expectations have changed. We're starting to do a lot more jobs in one, like maybe you feel like you're working 2 or 3 persons' jobs for one person's salary. Maybe the hours expectations have increased. Maybe your supervisory expectations have increased, or maybe things have decreased. Maybe the things that you used to love to do at work that were part of your job role are no longer possible. Strange, dysfunctional, or toxic workplace dynamics, maybe poor relationships with coworkers. Workplace toxicity can be sort of contagious. So if 1 or 2 people in your office feel negative and they're starting to share those emotions, that can really be contagious. Not enough social support. So perhaps your family or friends are super busy as well, and they don't have the time to support you the way they used to. And so you're sort of left feeling isolated. And then the work-life balance. We talk a lot about this. I'm sure you hear about it all the time. It's definitely a buzzword, and it's certainly easier said than done. So a lot of people feel they have a lack of work-life balance. Again, like working from home, it's really hard to establish a boundary if your computer is always with you or your phone is always next to you, and those hours have started to blur. So what happens when we burn out? We feel excessive stress. I'm sure that's no shock. Fatigue. You may feel more tired during the middle of the day. That 3 o'clock slump can start to feel even more and more challenging. You might find yourself drinking more coffee just to make it through the day, maybe taking midday naps if you're working from home, or going to bed earlier just because you can't make it to your normal bedtime. And then even fatigue during work, maybe you're zoning out during meetings, or just feeling like you're sitting at your desk all day, tired. Sleep disturbances. So again, maybe you're waking up more in the middle of the night with stressors that wake you out of your slumber. And I'm sure you all can agree that sometimes stressors seem 10 times more intense in the middle of the night than they do in the morning when you wake up. But stress can really lead to sleep disturbance. The quality of your sleep, how deeply you're sleeping, how quickly you're able to enter your REM cycles. Stress affects all of that. Emotional dysregulation, so feeling more sadness, anger, or irritability at a scale that maybe doesn't feel proportional to the issue at hand. And you're just feeling dysregulated, so you don't know how to bring yourself back to baseline or really see things in perspective. Things just seem bigger than they usually do. Substance misuse or abuse, like I mentioned before, maybe you find yourself drinking more days of the week or more often on the days of the week that you do drink. Maybe you're starting to partake in other substance use, like misusing prescription pills or misusing marijuana. And again, this can come into lifestyle addictions as well, like gambling, like I mentioned. That's a big stress relief for people, but it can be a vicious cycle. So just things to look out for. And then physical health issues such as heart disease, type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, and the vulnerability to other illnesses, because stress does weaken the immune system. So it is, again, a negative feedback loop in which our stress levels impact our health, and then our health impacts our stress. So finding ways to kind of break that feedback pattern, that loop that we get into, and catching things early, like meeting with your doctor more often to get blood work to notice if you're getting into that pre-diabetic range and what you can do lifestyle wise to hopefully reverse it. Keeping an eye on your diet. If you're stress eating, maybe you keep a bag of candy at your desk or a bag of chips at your desk. And I'm guilty of that. We all stress eat, but noticing if it's becoming a pattern, because that can really influence your health, which then influences your stress. So how do we manage job burnout? So assess your options. First, discuss your concerns with your manager. Maybe you can work together to change your expectations or reach compromises or solutions. Maybe your schedule can become more flexible. Maybe some projects can wait while others become a priority. And maybe emphasize for yourself the importance of breaks and mental health time in your role. We all have sick time at work, and mental health days should and can fall under taking a sick day. So if you feel one day you wake up and you're just really stressed and you're not going to be able to give 100% at work, take a mental health day. It's really going to pay off for yourself, for your team, and for your clients. So try a relaxing activity. Explore different platforms that have proven to reduce stress, such as yoga, stretching, Tai Chi. We're going to talk a lot about mindfulness and meditation in a little bit, but separate from that, just regular exercise. If you like playing basketball, make sure you play basketball twice a week. If you like riding your Peloton, ride your Peloton. Even spending time with your family, like here it says, seek support. That's another activity that can really help. Family and friends, colleagues, people you trust, just spend time with them. Maybe they have different ideas for coping than you thought of. If you have access to a private therapist or an employee assistance program, take advantage of these types of supportive services. And if you don't, ask your doctor for a referral. Your primary care doctor should have connections to mental health workers and should be able to give you information on how to get set up with that. Like I mentioned before, employee assistance programs, a lot of companies provide access to a free limited amount of counseling sessions that you can use to get your feet wet and talk about your problems with a mental health professional. And usually that comes at no cost to you or your insurance. So it's a wonderful resource that really goes underutilized. Make room for sleep. Sleep is the foundation of your well-being. You have to prioritize sleep if you're going to prioritize your health. So put down your phone, turn off your TV, and make sleep a priority. My goal every night, and it's easier said than done, of course, but is to try to limit my blue light activity at least 2 hours before bed. So if my bedtime is 10 or 10:30, my goal is to put my phone down and turn the TV off by 8:30, because those blue light rays trigger your brain to think it's a waking hour. It's similar to a daylight, and so it makes your brain think it's time to be awake, when in reality you should be sleeping. So try to put down the phone, try to turn off the TV, read a book, practice some mindfulness, do some gentle stretching or yoga. Anything that's going to set you up for a successful night of sleep is going to set you up for a successful next day. Get moving. So regular exercise and physical activity can make it easier to deal with stress, and it can also take your mind off work. So if you work in an office building and you work on the 4th floor, take the stairs. That's an easy way to incorporate exercise into your daily routine. I keep a pair of 2-pound dumbbells in my desk. And if I have 10 minutes to spare, I'll do a 10-minute arm workout just to get up and move if I find myself sitting at the desk too long. Standing desks have become really popular. I'm actually standing at one right now. A good way to make sure your blood gets pumping at work and removes the obstacle of just being sedentary all the time. So they're easy to find. You can buy one on Amazon, and sometimes your HR department can provide one for you. So what's mindfulness got to do with it? Mindfulness is a huge, huge topic lately. In the last few years, it's become more and more popular, more and more talked about, kind of pioneered in the modern age by Jon Kabat-Zinn, but it's been around for hundreds and thousands of years. And I would love it if we took just a couple minutes to do an active mindfulness meditation. I do want to be mindful of all of your time. So let's just do it for a couple minutes if you have the time. So go ahead, if you're sitting down at your desk, sit evenly in your chair, feel your feet root into the floor by uncrossing your legs, put your hands on your thighs and close your eyes. Take a couple deep breaths here, in through your nose to the count of 3, and out through your mouth for the next count of 3. And repeat that for the next few rounds of breath, and noticing how that breath feels in your body. Oftentimes we let our breath become really shallow when we're stressed, so it may only reach our chest, but in reality, we should be breathing all the way into our belly. We call it a 3-part breathing. Ideally, you'd breathe in and it would go through your chest, through your diaphragm, into your belly, and then out through your belly, through your diaphragm, and up through your chest and mouth, almost like a wave. So notice how that breathing feels for you. And notice if your mind has started to wander. Maybe this is a new activity that you haven't tried before and you're uncomfortable, or you're worried about your meeting that starts in 10 minutes. And just gently bring your thoughts back to this moment without judgment. The leaving judgment out is the most important part of a mindfulness practice, and it's also the most difficult part of a mindfulness practice. So as you're breathing and your thoughts are coming back to the present, notice how your feet feel rooted to the ground. Maybe you're putting more pressure on one foot versus the other. Feel how your bottom feels rooted into your chair. Feel how it feels to have your fingertips tap the tops of your thighs. Maybe you can tap your fingers there and bring some blood flow. Notice how your posture is. Are you slumping in your chair? Are you sitting up straight? Maybe try rolling your shoulders down your spine. Oftentimes we wear our shoulders like earrings, and that's not their purpose. So notice if your shoulders are shrugging up towards your head, bring them down with some slight, gentle breath. And just keep breathing for a few more minutes, or a few more seconds, really. Again, if your thoughts have wandered, that's a normal part of the human experience, but just bring them back. Those worries, thoughts, to-do lists, those will all be waiting for you after this. They're not going anywhere, so you can let go of them for a little bit. Okay, we'll take 3 more breaths together as we wrap up this meditation. Go ahead and slowly open your eyes if you haven't already, and just take note of how you feel now versus how you felt a few minutes ago. Hopefully a bit more relaxed. That is an easy mindfulness practice you can do anytime, anywhere. You can do it in the shower. You can do it in your kitchen. You can do it at your desk. You could do it during a meeting. So this is something that, although it's easy to use the excuse that you don't have time to meditate, you do, because you could do it anytime. So mindfulness is the basic human ability to be fully present, aware of where we are and what we're doing, and not overly reactive or overwhelmed by what's going on around us. In other words, it's just the ability to stay connected to one's breath, notice what's going on internally and externally, and again, most importantly, without judgment. So it doesn't have to be a traditional meditation. You know, you don't have to pull out a little rug and sit with your legs crossed and your hands, you know, in a traditional yogi mudra. You can do it anywhere. You can do it on a walk with your dog. You can do it while you're getting ready in the morning. You can do it while eating. Mindful eating is a huge, huge practice for a lot of people to get mindfulness into their practice. So with each bite, just noticing where your food comes from, noticing how it tastes, the different textures, how it feels to chew, how it feels to swallow, being grateful for the farmers and the animals that provided the food for you. And I'd love to hear in the chat, if you're willing, some ways that you've been mindful at work or home, or maybe some ways you plan on implementing now that you've learned more about mindfulness, ways you'd like to implement mindfulness at home or at work. And I'll just keep an eye on the chat as I move through the rest of the presentation. So how to help your employees. Look out for early warning signs. Many of them were already listed in that quiz earlier. So are you noticing people seeming more fatigued, or maybe not as excited about their accomplishments? Or maybe they're becoming more snappy with clients or coworkers. Maybe they just don't look the way they used to. Maybe they just look a little more down or depressed. So if that's the case, encourage breaks. Make sure break culture is a part of your culture. Everyone should be taking at least a 15, 30-minute break a day, just to get some blood pumping, walking around, take their mind off the screen. Provide memberships to mindfulness apps. If you have the budget for this, it can pay off a lot. It's a huge incentive for employees to keep working with you if you provide, you know, things like this. So Headspace, these are just some examples of mindfulness apps that I've either used or have heard of in my professional experience. So Headspace, 10% Happier, Waking Up, Insight Timer, Calm, Happify. You've probably heard of a few of these. I know Calm has an amazing ad campaign right now with LeBron James. So I'd be surprised if you haven't seen their commercials. But these, even if you aren't able to provide memberships, they are pretty affordable for yearly memberships, and they really can pay off. They remind you to meditate. You can set notifications on your phone. I don't know how many of you guys have an Apple Watch, but that has a breathe timer that reminds you to breathe once an hour. Normalize mental health days. Like I said, sick days are there for a reason, and mental health days can and should fall under the sick day category. So make sure that your employees know that. And then consider joining with an EAP if you don't have one already. So some examples are Wellspring, Modern Health, and then Washington State actually has an EAP for public employees. So that might be worth looking into if that applies to you. It looks like some suggestions in the chat of music, stretching before going to bed and waking up. Even just a minute on either side of sleep really can make a difference. Totally agree with that. Here are a couple different resources you can share with your teams. There's the Suicide Prevention Lifeline, the Crisis Text Line, Crisis Connection, the National Disaster Distress Helpline, which you can call or text. Washington Listens is a free program to call if you're feeling depressed, anxious, or overwhelmed by COVID-19. They're open Monday through Friday, 9 to 9. And the Washington Warm Line is a peer support helpline for people living with emotional and mental health challenges. And what's really great about this is the calls are answered by specially trained volunteers who have lived with those experiences. So you can really get some peer-to-peer mentorship by calling this line. So I recommend using any and all of these resources. They're free and they're always available. So take advantage of them. And with that, I will open up the panel to any Q&A. Happy to answer questions with time. I want to be cognizant of your all's time. So if you have questions, please feel free to chat them in. I'm happy to answer, or just comments too.
So this is Kathy. I'm going to jump in there. I think a lot of times um, I can say I probably see it in some of my peers. And so when you see maybe that somebody is having a difficult time, do you have some suggestions as how you might address that person? Just so that, how would I go about sharing some of the things that you've shared with us today?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say it starts with the culture. So even before you talk to that person individually, um, maybe at your next team meeting, just bring up some of these resources, talk about the transition to using mental health days for their sick days, and just teach each other or teach your employees to look out for each other for warning signs. And then once you've kind of set that culture up, I would encourage during perhaps your next, if it's a direct report, maybe your next one-on-one meeting with them, or offer to take them out to lunch if you don't have a scheduled time with them. And just bring up your concerns genuinely. Um, People can tell when you're sugarcoating or beating around the bush. So I would say, be honest, be authentic, come from a place of caring, and tell them that you're there for them, and that you're able to provide any resources that you can find, and you'll just provide a listening ear. But I really think it starts with culture.
I think that's great. I can share with you that there was a time a few months back that I thought I was dealing with things really, really well, and I found myself being really short with someone in the community that I really like a lot and I work a lot with, and I was very caught off guard by myself.
Hmm.
And so just, suggestions for, what, I think what I'm looking for is, I think, talking about having to kind of give ourselves some forgiveness and kindness and space. Can you touch on that maybe a little bit?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think it goes back to the mindfulness discussion of noticing when your mind wanders or when you're doing something, and removing the judgment. um Obviously, being your own worst critic is a trope for a reason. We tend to be really hypercritical of ourselves and have the highest expectations for ourselves over anyone else, even for the same tasks or same activities. So I would say to start to be mindful and notice when you do that, when you start to notice yourself having these unrealistic expectations for yourself, or if you do make a mistake, not being able to let it go, and start to think about where that comes from. Maybe your family culture is perfectionist, or maybe your work culture is perfectionist, and that's something you can bring up with your manager. And then outside of the home, just thinking about if you would treat a friend, a colleague, a coworker, a family member the way that your internal dialogue is treating yourself at that moment. And I can probably guarantee you the answer would be no.
Mm.
So start to think about it as an external person looking in. Would you treat someone the way you're treating yourself?
That's a great analogy. And I'm not seeing anything else in the chat, but let me just give it a minute, because I
Sure.
know that I just kind of jumped right on. But if there anybody else that has some questions for us today, take a moment. We do have a question. So about the loss of control, I feel I can't count on the normal. How can we, and
Mhm.
read this, and you might want to just go ahead and read it yourself, Mallory, and answer the question.
Yeah. So Diana, are you talking about the, like, in regard to the COVID-19 pandemic, that you can't count on things going back to normal or not knowing what normal means? Okay. Yeah, that's obviously a huge, huge sticking point for a lot of people. At the beginning of the pandemic in March, I think we all thought by May we'd be back in the office. And obviously things have changed a bit, but we still are very much in the throes of this pandemic. And you're right, we don't have any control over it. We can control what we can control, right? We can choose to get vaccinated if we want to. We can wear masks if we want to, and we can, social distance and be around folks who have the same practices that we do. But beyond that, there really isn't a lot we can control here. So, Diana, noticing that feeling of lack of control is distressing to you is a mindfulness practice. that is you digging into something that has been nagging at you and noticing it. So congratulations on being mindful. Accepting the new reality, I would say just trying to be as present as you can in the moments that come and noticing how little nuances of normalcy can come through. Maybe you're getting dinner with a friend and it's outside and it's not inside. So maybe you're a little chilly and it's not quite the same. You're wearing your coat during dinner and that doesn't feel normal. But the conversation, the connection, the face-to-face interaction feels familiar. So I would say try to, if you can, let go of those feelings of this is so weird. I don't like eating outside. I don't like having to wear my mask here. I don't like having to hand sanitize every 10 seconds. But I love spending time with my friend and getting dinner with her. And that feels familiar and normal. So just keep refocusing and reframing on what you can control, and B, what positivity you can take out of each experience. I think that's a good place to start. And know that eventually this will end. It's just having to hone that patience, which is obviously very difficult, but with more and more mindfulness meditation practice, patience can come with that.
Great. And so any other questions? And I'll give it a moment.
Okay.
To see. And while I'm waiting just to see if there's any final questions today, I want to remind everyone that this recording will become a permanent part of our library of webinars. And so you can ask us anytime to view these. They will be on YouTube, on the Issaquah Chamber YouTube channel, and probably eventually on an app that we're working on. So we just want to make sure that you know. So if you need to refer back or you want to share what Mallory has shared with us today, you can do so. And that's the reason we are recording this, because it's important that people be able to have the opportunity to sit down when it works for them to get the answers that they need to support them in their lives right now. So with that, I'd like to thank Mallory very much for joining us today. Thank all of you for attending. I know your lives are all very, very busy, as is everyone's, and to carve out time for yourselves. Again, to Mallory's point, we're all being very mindful and we're taking care of our mental health, and that's important. So thank you again, Mallory, for being here today.
Of course, thank you. And I just want to point out this last page has a lot of different resources that you can click on and share. So make sure to check it out if you have the time.
Wonderful, and lots of different thank yous here in the chat. And Mallory, for your convenience, I'm just going to go ahead and stop our recording now.
Okay, thanks.